So, a little housekeeping before we jump in. If you saw my toxic positivity review of the Black Ops 7 campaign, you already know that was a joke. It was a bit, a controlled experiment in smiling while describing a dumpster fire. This video is the opposite of that. No exaggerated corporate cheerfulness, no pretending the inability to pause is immersive. This is the serious version. Or, at least as serious as I'm capable of being while talking about a franchise that once gave us all ghillied up, and somehow ended up with fighting a kaiju plant monster while getting jumped by zombie spiders with upside-down human faces. Today I want to zoom out. Not just, is Black Ops 7 bad, but how did Call of Duty go from this
Take the Bangalore and get to the seawall!
to this? We're going to talk about what Call of Duty used to be, why the name Call of Duty actually meant something, how monetization, Warzone, and the annual treadmill ruined the series, and how Black Ops 7 is the confirmation that the Call of Duty franchise has everything except a soul. Let's start at the beginning. Before the battle passes, the crossovers, the giant machetes falling from the sky, there was just Call of Duty. The first few games were pretty straightforward. COD 1 and 2 dropped you into World War II with a pretty simple promise. We're going to put you in the boots of a soldier and make it feel cinematic as hell. You weren't a superhero. You were just a guy in a squad getting yelled at in 3 different accents while everything exploded around you. The early games did 3 things really well. Perspective. You played as multiple soldiers from different nations. The whole point was, this isn't your story. It's the war's story. And you're one tiny part of it. Tight campaigns that were short, directed, and replayable. You could beat them in a weekend and still remember specific missions years later. And the third is tone. Even when it leaned into spectacle, it was still rooted in war is ugly, war is chaos. There was weight to what you were doing. Then Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare shows up and completely rewires the genre. Suddenly you've got death from above, crew expendable, all ghillied up. Missions that are practically case studies in pacing and perspective. A modern setting that isn't just, "Hoorah, USA!" but actually tries to say something about intervention, escalation, and blowback. And a campaign that feels like a tightly scripted HBO miniseries. That design philosophy carries straight into Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops. Memorable set pieces, gulag rescues, snowmobile chases, Vietnam flashbacks, the numbers sequence, strong character anchors, Price, Soap, Ghost, Mason, Reznov, Woods, Menendez, all stitched together with clear emotional arcs, betrayal, revenge, paranoia, and moral compromise. You can say a lot about the early games being edgy or over the top, but they cared about 3 things: a campaign you could finish, a story you could follow, and characters you cared about. And for a lot of people, that's what Call of Duty meant. A bombastic, tightly crafted single-player roller coaster plus multiplayer, not instead of. They called it Call of Duty, and whether you thought about it consciously or not, that set expectations. A call is a summons, something you answer. And duty is about obligation, responsibility, and sacrifice. Doing something you might not want to do because you have to do it. The name served as a respectful nod to the brave Marines, soldiers, sailors, and airmen who sacrificed everything for the good of mankind. In the early games, that wasn't just branding, it was the theme. You're not chosen, you're assigned. You don't get to opt out because the mission is inconvenient. You're part of something bigger, and sometimes that something is deeply flawed, which is where a lot of the tension comes from. The best COD campaigns lean hard into that tension. Modern Warfare gives you impossible choices and ugly consequences. Black Ops locks you inside Mason's brain while he's being psychologically dismantled by his own programming. Even World at War hammers home how dehumanizing and brutal that kind of conflict is. The call in Call of Duty used to be moral, emotional, even existential. Fast forward to the modern era, and the word duty has shifted. Now, your duty is to your daily challenges. Your call is a push notification from the launcher reminding you that you have unused Battle Pass tokens. The games are still called Call of Duty, but in practice it often feels more like Call of Revenue, modern storefront. And that disconnect between the weight of the title and the weightlessness of a lot of recent campaigns is a big part of why so many people feel like the soul has leaked right out of the franchise. So, what changed? The short answer is money, scale, and the industry flipping from sell a game to own a platform. Once COD became a guaranteed blockbuster, Activision locked it into the annual release cycle, multiple studios rotating one game a year every year. And that has advantages. It keeps the brand constantly in the conversation, maximizes revenue, justifies a huge marketing spend, but the cost is time. Every year you're shipping a campaign, a full suite of multiplayer maps and modes, zombies, co-op, spec op style content, and now deep live service hooks, battle passes, cosmetics, and mid-season drops.
That is one big pile of shit.
And you're doing it while the tech, pipelines, and expectations keep ramping up. Activision has built their entire model around the annual timeline, and that timeline is not flexible. So, if a studio is pressed for time, corners are going to be cut. And spoiler alert, the cuts are never the part of the game that sells bundles. On top of that, you get the monetization curve, classic DLC map packs, supply drops and loot crates, COD points and premium currencies, battle passes, cosmetic bundles, and full-on live service economies. Today, COD's revenue doesn't just come from selling a $70 game. It comes from Warzone being a massive free-to-play gateway into the cosmetic carousel. First taste is free! It comes from skins, operators, and crossovers. It comes from seasonal passes and FOMO-driven cosmetics. From a business perspective, it's genius. From a narrative and identity perspective, it's a slow-motion lobotomy. Because once the real money is in free-to-play Warzone, seasonal cosmetics, and live updates, the single-player campaign stops being the reason for the game to exist and starts being a requirement the game has to ship with. And you feel that in the design. So you might be asking, so what? Why does the campaign even matter? It's all about the multiplayer and battle royale modes. Well, it matters because the campaign is the vessel that delivers the story. And the story is what grounds the game with a solid identity. It's the personality, the flavor. It's the soul. Without a strong narrative campaign to hold everything together, the franchise has no identity. Why is that a bad thing? I think you already know the answer. You can trace the decline of the campaigns as a priority by watching three things: how long they are, how structurally experimental they get, and how often they feel like repurposed content. Take Modern Warfare 2, the 2022 version, for example. A solid campaign overall, but you can feel the tug-of-war between classic set pieces and open sandbox missions that look suspiciously like testbeds for other modes. And then we get Modern Warfare 3, 2023. Which a lot of critics and players described as short, rushed, built out of DMZ Warzone-style open combat missions rather than bespoke campaign levels. Even IGN couldn't toe the line with this one, and they literally called the campaign a bizarrely cobbled-together set of missions that feel like they were carved out of another mode and stitched together with cutscenes. That's not just a bad year, that's a symptom. Because if your main live service modes are Warzone, DMZ extraction, and PvE endgame structures, it becomes very tempting and very efficient to build your campaign out of those same set pieces. I mean, why spend 2 years crafting a one-off cinematic mission that only exists in the campaign, when instead you can build one big open map, use it for Warzone, use it for DMZ raids, and slice it up into open combat missions for the campaign? From a production standpoint, that's smart. From a player experience standpoint, it's why recent campaigns increasingly feel like Warzone but with more cutscenes and fewer choices. So when Black Ops 7 comes along and says, hey, what if the entire campaign was co-op, always online, and structured like missions in a PvE live service mode? That's not an accident. It's the logical endpoint. Let's talk about Black Ops 7 specifically. Not as a comedy bit, but actually breaking down why it lands so badly for a lot of campaign fans. Black Ops 7's campaign, like Modern Warfare 3's, feels like DLC side content, a stitched-together experience where the structure is clearly built around co-op PvE, hallucinatory dream sequences, and wave-based encounters with chunky health bar enemies rather than a focused single-player story. That lines up with what you see when you actually play it. Black Ops 7 does something genuinely bold. The campaign is effectively a co-op mode that you can play solo, not a solo campaign with co-op support. It sounds like semantics, but it changes everything. The missions are built for multiple players, wide arenas, multiple objective points, enemy density tuned for a squad. Pacing assumes constant forward motion and chaos, not quiet character beats or controlled tension. And of course, the big one, you can't pause. In a traditional Black Ops campaign, moments of quiet are used to build characters, shift tone, and let story beats land. In Black Ops 7, those moments are replaced with all the design tricks you use to stop 4 people from getting bored in a PvE session. More enemies, more objectives, more hold this zone sequences, more okay, now defend the laptop again. It's not that co-op campaigns don't work. They absolutely can. It's that Black Ops 7's implementation feels less like we designed a story for co-op and more like we designed a PvE mode and then built the story on top of it. This is painfully apparent when you play the campaign solo. The NPC squad mates that accompany you in all the cutscenes magically disappear when the cinematic ends. For the first time ever, you play through the entire campaign as a one-man army. What makes it jarring is that the NPC voiceover banter still triggers during gameplay. You are clearly by yourself, but you have voices in your head talking to you about what you're seeing. The experience goes from playing the part of a heroic soldier to playing as a delusional whack job who's fighting imaginary plant monsters with his imaginary friends. The cradle weapon and the hallucinatory sequences could have been a great Black Ops hook. The series has always loved unreliable perspectives, numbers, brainwashing, conspiracies. The problem in BO7 isn't that there are hallucinations, it's what they're used for. Instead of a tool to deepen character psychology and a way to explore guilt, trauma, or moral conflict, they mostly just serve as a justification to throw surreal set pieces at you, a reason to remix locations and events without worrying about continuity, and a narrative get-out-of-jail-free card for anything that doesn't make sense. A lot of sequences feel less like we're in this character's fractured mind, and more like we're in a DMT-fueled highlight reel of Black Ops iconography. You see, when everything's a dream, a hallucination, or a mind-linked vision, nothing really has consequences. The more the game leans on Cradle to excuse incoherent structure, the less weight any of it has. Menendez used to be one of the strongest villains in Call of Duty. Charismatic, memorable, morally complex in his own broken way. In Black Ops 2, he wasn't just the bad guy. He had a backstory that actually made sense, personal stakes with key characters, and motivations beyond the writers needed a villain. By the time we get to Black Ops 7, he feels more like a brand asset than a character. He appears, says some lines, reminds you of older, better games, and then the story moves on. His presence is more about triggering nostalgia than about driving the current narrative. And he's technically not even really in the game. He is solely a hallucination and deep-faked scapegoat used by a villain that doesn't have any of their own charisma to add to the story. And that's kind of the theme of Black Ops 7's campaign as a whole. It feels less like a story with a legacy, and more like a legacy costume draped over a live service skeleton. Now this brings us to the mission design and PvE content. When you step back and look at the mission roster, a pattern emerges. Wide combat spaces that could easily be repurposed as co-op maps, encounters built around health bar touting bullet sponge enemies while defending a location as you wait for a progress bar to max out, an objective design that feels like a checklist, not a narrative progression. And this is why the campaign often feels like a mashup of zombies, Destiny-style PvE, and standard COD gunplay. It's not that these missions are unplayable. Some of them are even fun, in that turn off your brain and shoot things with friends kind of way. But they don't feel crafted with the same intent as classic Call of Duty missions. Instead of, here's a specific scenario that tells a piece of the story, it's, Here's a section of a future Warzone map with objectives and an inconsequential vague story hovering somewhere overhead. And then of course there's Endgame, the PvE grind mode that sits on the other side of the campaign. If you look at the structure holistically, it's hard not to read the campaign as a tutorial, a tone setting sequence, a way to unlock things, and then a handoff into the real retention loop. The story doesn't feel like the point. It feels like the onboarding. Which circles back to that earlier question. At this point, what does Call of Duty mean? And who are these campaigns even for? To add insult to injury, Black Ops 7 Endgame is a retexture of MWZ and plays like it's running on the same servers, which means that most matches have insanely high server latency. My last match had a ping of 180 milliseconds. And just like the current state of MWZ, Black Ops 7's Endgame is also plagued with stability issues. Since Endgame is in extraction mode, you lose everything when the game crashes. I lost all desire to play this game mode after getting my progress reset twice due to the game crashing. But here's the main point. Aside from BO7 Endgame, mechanically speaking, Call of Duty is still absurdly polished. The shooting feels good, the animations are fluid, the sound design is ridiculous, the production values are AAA all the way down the line. The problem isn't that the Call of Duty developers forgot how to make an FPS. The problem is that the developers forgot how to make Call of Duty. A lot of modern COD entries, and Black Ops 7 is just the current example, feel like they're built around 3 new priorities. Retention, keep you playing the franchise as long as possible. Conversion, funnel you towards modes where you're most likely to spend money. And continuity, integrate content across Warzone, multiplayer, PvE, mobile, etc. And to be fair, those aren't evil goals. They're legitimately sound business practices if your sole pursuit is generating consistent revenue. But when the cold pursuit of revenue takes precedence over telling a coherent story, saying something profound about war, power, or people, and making the campaign feel like it exists for its own sake, you end up in this uncanny place that Call of Duty is in now, where the visuals are more realistic than ever, the acting is better than ever, the guns feel better than ever, and somehow the cumulative experience is a forgettable blur that serves only to remind the player of how good we used to have it. Black Ops 7 isn't an outlier, it's a symptom. You can draw a line from Modern Warfare 2, 2009, cinematic, controversial, focused, to the loot box era where microtransactions quietly spread across the series, to Warzone, where live service COD proves it can make staggering amounts of money as an ongoing platform, to Modern Warfare 3 in 2023, where the campaign feels like DMZ missions welded together with cutscenes, to Black Ops 7, where the campaign is now fully formatted as a co-op PvE mode with a half-assed story added in post. At every step, the systems get smarter, the business model gets sharper, the content machine gets more efficient, and the part of COD that used to answer, "What is this about besides guns?" gets thinner. That's the sole problem. Not that COD is arcadey or dumb. It's always been pulpy. But that it used to care enough to pick a perspective and commit to it. So we come back to the question, does Black Ops 7, and by extension modern Call of Duty in general, still deserve the name Call of Duty? If all you mean by that is solid gunplay, high production values, seasonal content, a familiar FPS comfort food loop, then yes, sure, this is still recognizably COD. But if Call of Duty still means anything like a coherent, replayable campaign you can finish and talk about years later, a story that wrestles, even clumsily, with the idea of obligation, sacrifice, or the cost of violence, a sense that the campaign exists because someone wanted to say something, not just fulfill a bullet point on a product roadmap, then Black Ops 7's campaign, and honestly a couple of recent entries, fall way short of that bar. It's not just, this game is mid. It's, this game doesn't even seem to remember what its own title implies. When Call of Duty becomes a brand you slap on top of Warzone, mobile, co-op PvE, annual expansions masquerading as full releases, the word duty quietly slides off the box and into the fine print. Your duty is to your playtime. Your call is the daily login. And if you grew up with COD as the series that defined cinematic FPS campaigns, that's a hard pill to swallow. So, what does COD need to get its soul back? Now, obviously, I don't have the P&L sheets, and I'm not pretending this is easy, but if we're talking purely from a player and campaign perspective, I think there are a few obvious levers. 1. Decouple campaign ambition from the annual calendar. The single biggest problem is time. If Activision insists on yearly releases, fair enough, but there's no law that says that every entry needs a full traditional campaign. You could alternate campaign years and multiplayer Warzone expansion years, release smaller, focused campaign expansions with longer dev cycles, market some entries more honestly as premium expansions rather than full sequels. But right now, we're getting the worst of both worlds. Full price tags, half-step campaigns. Number 2, stop building campaigns out of leftover parts. If you want the campaign to feel like it matters, it can't just be DMZ/endgame but with cutscenes. Borrowing tech and maps is fine. Reusing assets is fine. That's game development. But the design goals for a campaign level need to be different than the goals for a Warzone POI, a multi-use PvE arena, an endgame contract space. Campaign missions should start from what moment or idea do we want to convey, not what can we do with the space we already built for another mode. Number 3, pick a theme and commit. Some of the strongest COD campaigns work because they pick one big thematic lane and lean into it. Modern Warfare, cost of intervention and blowback. Black Ops, paranoia, brainwashing, moral instability. World at War, brutality and dehumanization. Black Ops 7 tries to be corporate dystopia, hallucinogenic sci-fi thriller, nostalgia trip, co-op PvE shooter, and it doesn't fully commit to any of them. If the series wants to reclaim its narrative punch, future campaigns need to pick a core theme and let everything, mechanics, set pieces, characters, structure, serve that theme. Number 4, remember the human scale. COD has always had nukes, satellites, world-ending stakes, but the moments people remember are crawling through Pripyat grass with Price, carrying a wounded ghost through a burning battlefield, landing on the beaches of Normandy a la Saving Private Ryan, tinnitus and all, learning that your friend and comrade Viktor Reznov, who had your back throughout the entire campaign, was actually dead the whole time, getting betrayed by Philip Graves and having to sneak through town while avoiding Shadow Company patrols, watching Soap bleed out on the floor while Price desperately tries to save him. Even the most over-the-top COD stories had human anchors, and lately those anchors are getting weaker. They need to bring back smaller, more intimate missions, quieter moments between characters, stakes that aren't just about the entire world, but about these people in this situation. Most importantly, if you're going to call it Call of Duty, then make that a duty to unit core God country, not just to the battle pass. So that's where I'm at with Call of Duty right now. A franchise that still has incredible tech, best-in-class gun feel, massive reach, and more content than any of us will ever fully play. But also one that feels like it's slowly losing the part that made it mean something beyond the shooter everyone plays. Black Ops 7 isn't uniquely awful in a vacuum. It's just the latest, clearest example of a trend that's been building for years. Now I want to hear from you. When did you feel the shift? Was there a specific game where you thought, okay, something's off now? Do you still care about COD campaigns, or are you basically Warzone/zombies only at this point? And if you could design the perfect return-to-form campaign, what would it look like? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Seriously, I'd love to hear them. If you found this breakdown helpful, hit the like so YouTube knows I didn't spend all these hours screaming into the void for nothing, and subscribe if you want more long-form, overly analytical rants about games that obviously did not need this much analysis. So I'm Monty. This has been my deep dive into Call of Duty, the franchise with cutting-edge tech, immaculate gun feel, and a rapidly evaporating sense of duty. As always, keep shooting, keep looting, and I'll see you in the next one.